I would like to welcome everyone before starting with the presentation. Thank you to be here listening. I am Gioele Bigini, doctoral student at the University of Urbino, and today I would like to introduce you to my work in progress entitled Decentralizing the Internet of Medical Things with Distributed Ledger Technologies and Off-Chain Storages, a proof of concept. This work has been in joint collaboration with Dr. Freschi, Professor Bogliolo, and Professor Lattanzi. And I would like also to mention the partners that are Università Politecnica delle Marche, Digit SRL, and Regione Marche. So the agenda for today is the following. I will go through a brief introduction about the Internet of Information and the Internet of Value. We will see the purpose of the paper, and we will discuss about why the world could be decentralized in the future. Then we'll go through the proposed model, and I will show you an Internet of Medical Things case study that we built at the University of Urbino, the proposed HALO network, and the related architecture. And then we will go through the conclusions with a final summary, the future works, and the acknowledgement. So why I talked about the Internet of Information and the Internet of Value? When the Internet has been built, it has been built with the idea that it was a layer for transferring information. So the Internet was used mainly for accessing web page, accessing information, downloading softwares, looking for images, and watching videos. And actually, when they built the Internet of Information, they didn't think of the Internet of Value. So they didn't think of the idea that we could transfer also value over the Internet. Distributed ledgers, which the first that we know has been Bitcoin with the blockchain, is the first attempt to create the layer of the Internet of Value. So with the distributed ledgers nowadays, we could transfer money, but we could also transfer other assets like real assets or patents, and we could also sign contracts. So why this should be important for the Internet of Medical Things? The reason is that sensitive data are among the most precious digital assets that we have as individuals. So the purpose of this paper is to try to lay the foundations for a system that can provide adequate security in terms of privacy, allowing the sharing of information between individuals. The Internet of Medical Things, that is the joint area between the Internet of Things, the healthcare, and big data, could be life-changing for lots of people in the future, because it represents the opportunities of medical advancement, personalized medicine, and to create the permanent historical healthcare knowledge. But nowadays, the digital health sector is really difficult to innovate because of its limitations, that are basically the privacy regulations and how we could manage the data. And so, why I say that the world could be decentralized? Well, we all know that what we use every day is based on centralized system. Centralized system basically have a central authority. The provider has the power and also the power to maintain the network. So it takes decisions, and at the same time it needs to maintain the network. But this kind of architecture is uncomfortable when we are handling, for example, sensitive data. Because with sensitive data, of course, the provider needs to comply several rules, sometimes very difficult to comply, like the one from privacy for sensitive data. And in this case, a decentralized system could be really helpful because the absence of a central authority allows for the peers, so individual as participants, to have the power and to handle the network, to maintain the whole network. So, like in the table below, Just a brief example, what could happen with data. If we have some sensitive data, we could share them in very different way. But every way that in which we try to handle this data could lead to some kind of disadvantage. For example, if we give free data, of course, is not a very good choice to do. If we use the data and we distribute data as open masked, we are going to lose some information. While if we rely on a central authority, like a national healthcare system, it could be still at risk, but also the access to the data is basically broken. So the first chance that we have is to use decentralized data that could allow for zero risk of privacy, since the privacy is in the hand of the user, and also to open the accessibility of this data. Moving to the proposed model, I'm showing you now an Internet of Medical Things application that we built at the University of Urbino. The application is called Balance, is a smartphone application that could be used for measuring the postural stability of an individual. It's very simple, and it works by simply installing it and then by keeping a straight posture, starting the measurements. Measurements that could be started with the start button and that collects data in around 30 seconds. So which is the problem here? The problem here is that every data that we collect from Balance is basically sent to a backend that is a centralized backend that collects all the information in a masked form. So by collecting information in a masked form, we are going to reduce the information, and so losing part of the information. And also we have to be compliant to all the possible rules, because basically we need to follow the rules that are given by the governments, like the European governments. So we basically started thinking on how we could create a new paradigm different from the centralized paradigm that of course is not meant to be a workaround to the centralized paradigm, but to be a different paradigm. We proposed a model that we call Halo Network that is envisioning sensitive data decentralization by means of trusted private networks in a trustless scenario. As you can see in the slide, this is just a concept, but the idea is that these networks are basically composed by trusted individuals that are able to take decisions over data. And so this network should contribute to medical advancement, enable personalized care, and secure the data. To be more specific and try to better explain the concept, imagine that we have this private network called Halo that is composed by 5 people, for example, a family. So a family is composing the network. And every time that someone external, like a remote user, a remote stakeholder, an institution, for example, asks data, directly interface with the private network. And this could be handled by a smartphone application, for example, that is giving you all the requests, all the overview over the network and the private network and the state of the node. I'm talking about the node because actually we are thinking at this as an external implementation out of the smartphone. So like as the smartphone is acting as an interface for talking with an external node that is actually the peer of the network. The proposed architecture then is focused on the interaction that remote users have with the Halo network. So basically, imagine that we have remote users that are asking data to the Halo network. What happened basically is that the Halo network will first check in the public ledger through the smart contracts if the remote users are already authorized. If so, of course, it forward the request to the IoT devices, depending on the policy. And if the Internet of Medical Things device grant the access, then the private network just reconstruct the data that are present on the distributed storage and sent back to the remote users. Same things more or less happen to when we want to store the data in the distributed storage. The idea is that the IoT device generate the data, then send it to the private network, and the private network takes care of storing the data in the distributed storage and send then back the information about the position of the data. So why using, for example, a distributed storage? Because the idea is that we could leverage distributed storage without then being worried about the size of information that we have to store. We have to imagine that the degree and the magnitude of the IoT devices in general will increase a lot in the future. And so if we don't want to rely to a central authority, we have to use distributed storages. And we should also use public ledger for the simple reason that public ledger, for example, could be really useful in make transparent the communication with remote users, and an internal private network to ensure that malicious users could be detected easily. Okay, right. So we reached the conclusions, and there are some advantages and disadvantages by using this approach. And the advantages are related to the fact that we are creating health data maintained and owned by the creator. The remote users need and must accept the rule predefined by the owner. Smart contracts are a transparent way for managing permissions with remote users. Distributed ledgers guarantee both transparency and logging, while distributed storages allow also for data relocation in case of malicious intrusion, since the data are persistent but not permanent. As disadvantage, we know that all the data, for example, saved in the distributed storages are just use a cryptographic process to be stored. And of course, cryptography needs advancement for this in the future, or the risk is that all the position in the distributed storages could be exploited. And also the data reconstruction by using, for example, the solution of the peers as external nodes goes every time to reconstruct all the informations. And so this introduced I/O operation that could slow down all the process. The conclusion then is that basically the overall solution is blockchain agnostic. So potentially the distributed ledger could be the one preferred by a developer. And the second thing is that it could represent tomorrow like a sensitive data portal to which an institution or a remote stakeholder interested in the data could interface directly. As future works, of course, we are working for the implementation. We already started the implementation of the proposal, and we are trying to investigate the decentralized digital identity. Since, of course, creating such a layer of healthcare data needs also to verify the person that are behind those data. And as a future vision, we think that in the future, this kind of, we could say, data layer in some way could be used to build a really serious and huge system for machine learning and artificial intelligence Before closing up my presentation, I would like also to thanks my tutor, Professor Lattanzi, for the discussion and that provided. Digit, that is the company that actually helped me with the infrastructure and the personnel for the development of the overall project and balance. The foundation, then, behind balance, and you are all invited to take a look to the work from Professor Lattanzi, and the funding entity that is Regione Marche that actually is funding my work. So from my side, that's all. Thanks for your attention. And if you have any question, I'm open to questions and suggestions. You can reach me also through my email or also with my website. Thank you very much.